I'm so uncomfortable with it. Uh, yeah, I'd say so. Um, yeah, so basically typical, like typical what you'd expect from the space. With the only like real rule, which is I've discussed with both of you, is that if somebody's like kind of going off and refusing to answer a question, that you sort of rein it in. Sounds good to me. Since I invited you to my Discord for this, I'll let you pick who you want to go first, John. I'm sorry, did you say you wanted to go first? Okay, by all means.
Down principles as undeniably true without consideration of evidence or the opinions of others. And so what I want to take from that is that I think these atheist theist debates often fall into kind of two patterns for me. And the first one is the God question. And the second is more of a doctrinal discussion. And so I was hoping more today to have more of a doctrinal discussion, because in asking the God question, each side can tend to have quite dogmatic lines of argument because it requires the same lines of reasoning from atheists and theists. I believe, I do not believe, and I know of no research that can say otherwise. So that's my position on the whole subject.
All right. Drazi, 4 minutes.
Okay, so my main issue with atheist and atheist debaters in particular is that, like I said, they are just as dogmatic. I think that they have an idea of how the universe came to be. They have an idea of um, the kind of assumptions that people make that are religious and why they think what they think, and they use this to dismiss any possible ideas that the religious have. But they're not using anything other than their own strict beliefs to justify it. Like they can point to science when they make certain arguments, but ultimately it's just coming down to faith just as well. And part of my argument is that they are just as bad at conversion as they are the religious. Um, they're not reaching across the aisle. They're not trying to meet religious people where they're at. And I think the way that they're really bad at that is they don't engage with religious arguments. They never adopt the frame that the religious people are using to do it. They don't. They'll ignore the kinds of claims that people that are religious make constantly, and they'll keep on asserting that they need proof when atheists also have absolutely no proof to justify their positions either. And I think this makes it an inherently bad faith discussion on the atheist part, because at least the religious side of things isn't pretending like they have proof, but the atheist side pretends that it has proof. And I'll cede the rest of my time.
All right. Well, If you guys want to have an open discussion, I don't know where you want to go with this, but I will allow it. Generally speaking, try not to go ahead and go over 2 minutes at a time, because I don't think that at that point, somebody's going to be able to adequately respond to you. But let's get started.
Sounds good to me.
So I just wanted to clarify. So when you said that atheists were kind of overly certain in their arguments, I assume you're referring to the arguments along the God question of whether or not there is a divine being.
Well, I mean, an atheist isn't defined by anything other than their lack in belief of a God being, right? I don't know what other approach I could take to sort of defining atheist. Do you have an alternative definition?
Yeah, I mean, atheist is that is the fundamental standard. They don't believe in a divine being or a God being.
Yeah.
But I think that religious people have other areas that they maybe have to defend because of their doctrine. They're forced to defend the entire doctrine and traditions, and that I've often seen that become quite dogmatic in their defense of those. For example, why don't Muslims eat pork? And if you ask them that, it's the response will often seem quite dogmatic to someone asking that question. Or for Mormons, why not coffee? And why is Gatorade okay, for example?
Sure. So can you explain to me? So when I think that I don't think that almost any person who is religious, um, it should be one expected to answer for the entire doctrine. And then also there's sort of this like baked in assumption that when there's a debate about religiosity, that even if the person doesn't take their doctrine to be a literal thing, it still seems like they're held to account of their doctrine being literal every step along the way. So like if a Christian applies like a hermeneutic stance to the Bible, they're still going to be demanded to defend certain things in the Bible as it's written, rather than how that person's going to interpret it.
Yeah, I mean, interpreting the Bible is quite hard, and it is quite easy for a bad faith atheist to take a passage wildly out of context. But my point is that in defending, for example, the traditions, going back to pork and coffee,
Hmm.
it's it does come down to quite rigid tribal rule sets that are always going to be explained quite dogmatically.
Um, yeah, it'll usually be explained along the lines of like, I mean, like the simplest version of this argument would be, God doesn't want me to, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say so.
So they're assuming that there is a God and that this is against the desires of God. When an atheist proposes that there is no God, can you explain to me by what metric they're making this claim that isn't equally as dogmatic?
So, to give an example, if an atheist came to you with, let's say, their paper of the day that
Hmm.
they said that's the kind of argument that you're getting at.
Well, I'm sorry, maybe I don't understand what paper of the day means.
Oh no, sorry. So if they found a research paper they particularly liked
Hmm.
and they decided to use that in a debate,
To explain why God doesn't exist?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I don't think that there can be a research paper on why God doesn't exist that isn't inherently dogmatic, just like the religious person is. Like in the exact same way. Is that both sides are taking it solely on faith, based on their like emotional connection to the material that they're referring to.
true, but this it requires the same lines of logic from both parties, and it's I believe, I don't believe.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that they're just as bad faith and dogmatic as the religious people are. I'm saying that they're both on the same side of I'm just sort of believing something without having a justified reason to do so. But I think and I would say that because the atheists don't believe in something that like personally, I think that they should be approaching these conversations with a lighter touch than they usually do. There seems to be, considering that they're both equally dogmatic and they're both positing their position for the same uh, unjustifiable reasons, that they come in a lot more hot and arrogant and what's the word? Not confident. I guess yeah, just arrogant. The lack of willing to listen, the hand waving of explanations by the religious. But they force the religious people to contend with their arguments as though they're somehow inherently better. And I find this hypocritical.
So, in this circumstance, for the God question for this debate, I have seen many of these versions, and I've seen the exact same thing that you've said.
Yeah.
So that there are two parties, and they're coming from such wildly different backgrounds that they're unwilling to compromise and understand the other's set of beliefs. But I think where atheists become less dogmatic and the religious is naturally when it comes to the doctrine.
Does this work in any kind of hermeneutical approach to doctrine? Or does this completely fall apart once the doctrine isn't to be taken like word for word literally?
It's, I mean, for the religious people that I've met and seen, it's not to be taken exactly literally.
Right.
But when you've got, say, for example, the Mormon faith, you've got the, what's his name? Russell M. Nelson giving, I'm not sure what it's called, but he gives proclamants to say the kind of the general consensus and direction of the faith. That's my point, is that is quite seemingly dogmatic. And
Sure. If you're saying that an appeal to authority when referring to a doctrine is going to be fairly dogmatic, I would say so. But then I would also kind of point to if an atheist appeals to the authority of like Richard Dawkins or something that Dawkins had written to be a very similarly dogmatic position.
sure, but I feel the religious side is at a disadvantage in this. When, say, for example, an atheist can choose from any of their strong subjects. They could come out from a sociological point of view, psychological. They could even any of their study of choice. Whereas if you ask a Mormon to interpret their position, to describe their position, they have to follow the lines that Russell M. Nelson has set out.
No, I guess I just wouldn't agree. So like you can be an atheist. I think it's fine to be an atheist and disagree with like Dawkins about things. I think Dawkins is a pretty good authority, but there's also atheists like Jordan Peterson who are like he's like an atheist and a Christian at the same time, right? He suggests that like the Bible isn't true at all, but the stories within it are super important, and so you should behave as though they are true, because this will lead you to a more prosperous life. So he calls himself a Christian, but at the core, he's actually an atheist who sort of larps as a Christian. But because like I think there's an argument to be made that like teleologically he's a Christian because he's, if you observe him from the outside, well, you say, yeah, this guy's a Christian. But if you knew internally what's in his head, or on the rare instances where he's willing to talk about it, say like, no, I don't think that it's true. It doesn't matter if it's true. It's just that this is the best way to live your life. So like
So
I think that saying that there's like one central authority that sort of represents any given sect of a religion, it would be like just false. That there's a reason why any major religion has like tons of different sects. There's a reason why we can talk about Mormons, Lutherans, Baptists, because there are disagreements about the doctrine, right? Or like I guess Mormons, they even created their own doctrine because they disliked the doctrine that they came from so much.
So I get your point about Jordan Peterson being a cultural Christian rather than theologically believing the faith itself.
Yeah.
So I'm not too familiar with Jordan Peterson's work, I have to say. But
For my
that's
argument, you only need to know what I told you.
okay. But so essentially that position
Let's give
isn't.
let me give a little point of clarity. Jordan B. Peterson is a doctorate from Canada. He has a lot of affiliations with like kind of red pill ideologies, keep your room clean, fix your house, and all that stuff. He's also well known for a drug addiction and being kind of a nasally, whiny person. Just as like a quick point of clarity, that's what I would say. I think he has some good ideas, but they're mostly like clean your room, take a shower, get out of your house, lose weight. So yeah.
Not gonna include he's a professor of
No, that's
psychology.
literally that is the only thing. I'm only doing this for John. That's it.
Okay, and
No,
also,
thank
John,
you.
I don't encourage you to Google him or watch any of his stuff.
I will actually disagree with you on that. I do encourage it. I think it's good things. Obviously, we wouldn't have it as part of the debate. However, John, 2 minutes. Go ahead, please.
So I think the group think that you're describing is that some atheists subscribe to their kind of thinker of the day, and that man lays out their arguments and their logic that they kind of parrot to in debates against religious people. But I'd say the same structure is existing in many religious societies that I've seen. The structures of they have a preacher and lays out his version of the doctrine, and those messages are disseminated and followed and parroted by the followers of that sect. My point is that that there are far more paths and backgrounds for an atheist. Is not just an atheist; they have their own background in, I don't know, geology or whatever, biology or whatever, so
Uh,
that they have far more tools from which to attack someone who's a Christian or a religious person who's just they're following the doctrine of their favorite speaker or favorite ideologue. Well, not ideologue, sorry, but spiritual leader.
Authority.
Yes.
Okay, and I guess I would just say that atheists do the exact same thing. I just for sake of clarity, I just want to ask. It seems like the first part of what you said just seemed to agree with my position is that they're the same. But then you did say at the end that they have more to attack the other person with. So I'll agree that it seems like people that do faith-based arguments are not super good at it all the time, and I think that there's a lot of points that they could be making in favor of their position that they don't make towards atheists. But I don't think that there's like an inherent less dogmatism simply because they can rely on science to like disprove a story if it were to be taken literal from doctrine. And I guess I still haven't seen you sort of lay out how, if I'm going to allow for some degree of hermeneutics when interpreting a doctrine, and I guess if people don't know what this word is, it's just basically that you can interpret the words as not literal. So each person is kind of going to have their own version of the doctrine in their head, and that's usually what they're going to be defending. And I think that atheists kind of do the same thing, even though both sides will have certain authorities that they're kind of like mentally enmeshed with when it comes to approaching these ideas. They're still going to end at the end of the day going to be their own like versions that's sort of put through their lens. And I think that both sides are still doing the same thing because of this. But if you maybe can clarify ways in which atheists have a less dogmatic approach because of their additional resources to attack the religious with, I'd be happy to consider those.
So, from my experience in seeing religious people say discuss their faith amongst each other, it's it's mostly Bible study. It's disseminating the passages and the meanings and the intonations and the context of those stories. And through those, you build, essentially, they refer to it as building faith. And so those things that they're studying, those they are quite central, I do believe, to the kind of human experience, and they do speak to us on some level. But sorry, let me just think. So those texts essentially take those to build up that kind of cultural body from. Sorry, I'm just having a brain fart here.
Yeah, okay, take your time. I have a timer running. At 2 minutes, I will play the cricket sound and ask you to get to the point, but
no,
don't
yes,
take it personally.
In all the Bible studies that I've seen and been to, that's the process that is followed. And so that background that religious people come from is they always, in all of their arguments that I've seen, it's always quoting the scripture. It's all of the arguments that we make to each other in a religious context, we would be quoting scripture. We'd be referring to other scripture. And so if we were to take that line of reasoning or that style, it would, to an atheist, be entirely dogmatic. Thank you. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I thought it would be funny, so that's what I'm here for.
So, as somebody who grew up in rural Michigan, I've seen a lot of Bible studies. Even there was sort of like an implicit social pressure for me to, like, be a part of something like that. So I was in like a Youth for Christ group, even though I was not a believer, and I went to some Bible studies and stuff just to sort of be social with my community. And I know what you're talking about with Bible study. However, I think that the very fact that Bible study exists means that there is, like, if you go to a Bible study, you are succumbing to the idea that of hermeneutics. Like, we can't just read this book and then get what we're supposed to get out of it. We have to discuss it amongst each other. And if the suggestion is that because religious people gather in groups to kind of like build faith and discuss among each other, I would say that this certainly happens, but I mean, atheists do this as well. It seems to be a lot more like the purpose of the atheist one seems to be just sort of circle jerk to me. They sort of just talk about how wrong the other side is. There doesn't seem to be as much of like intelligent discussion amongst atheists of themselves about like sort of dismantling the idea of a creator or invalidating specific doctrines. It just seems to be a bit more of like even more tribalistic. Like we're gathering just because we're the same, rather than it seems like the religious people have a purpose for gathering to engage with each other about the thing that's bringing them together.
So I have, firstly, I really do and quite enjoy tribally gathering in religious groups. It is not a bad experience. It feels quite good. But in all the universities I've been to, I've never quite experienced the same thing in the opposite direction from an atheist perspective. It's always been mentioned kind of in passing in kind of seminars or group talks that we've had, or I've been to in universities, which I'm where the main kind of seem to be the atheist hotbed. Yeah, I've never seen the same experience in any university. Essentially, is my point.
Sure, it might be underrepresented in universities, but if you take a look online, I think you'll see that there's like pretty strong, pretty tight-knit atheist communities all over the place. In fact, I'm pretty confident that the origins of like the online like debate space came from like collective atheist groups going around trying to dunk on religious people. May not have been the very first, but this is certainly some of the earliest of like online debate spheres formed around this idea. So I do know that they're pretty cliquey, and I do know that they do carry quite a following that's pretty tribalistic. One encounter, well, sorry, two encounters with Darth Dawkins showed me exactly what that was like. And oh my God, you want to talk about like these people were oh, sorry, that's certainly not atheist. The people that were going against him, which is fair because he's obnoxious, they were just as religious as the religious people are, because they really, those kinds of atheists sort of flock to wherever he goes, as insufferable as he is, and maximally, by the way. There are atheists that will gather in groups and just like sort of follow wherever he's going to uh, like argue with his people who follow him and or him. And it seems like there's I can't imagine the reason to do that if it's not dogmatic. What do you suggest the reason is that atheists want to sort of uh, play the role of missionary if there's not like a dogmatic belief in no God?
So the communities you're describing are ones, I mean, I've never personally had any experience with them, but the kind of online kind of tribal center around one idea and then attack the antithesis of that idea
Mhm.
is not just, it's a human trait. It's not an atheist only or religious only trait. Online forums that are dedicated to one purpose tend to be quite dogmatic in of themselves, and that's not a atheist thing. That's a human thing.
Well, I'm not supposing that it's strictly an atheist thing, but I'm just putting atheists in the same camp as the religious. And I would say that this, when you're suggesting that Bible study implies a more dogmatic view of their belief, I'm saying that atheists also emulate a similar style. And then even go out after they sort of convene in their groups and sort of play missionary for the idea that there is no God as well. So I'm not saying that this is a thing that is specifically adhered to atheists. I'm saying atheists and religious people alike do the same thing.
So when I brought up Bible study, it was merely to say that that's the style that I've seen. So when we discuss with our peers and we adopt certain styles, we adopt certain arguments and mannerisms, when we go out to argue with others, we bring those styles and we argue with those styles. And so referring to, and so, but circling kind of back to the point about online communities and their nature of attack and defense ideologically, I think from the religious atheist online kind of debate could be replicated in many other, it is replicated in any other kind of online left versus right or Israel versus Palestine debate, where it's always going to be dogmatic. These online community conflicts, it's quite a low effort, feel good fight environment, and so these environments that you're describing are always going to be equally dogmatic, no matter who the side is.
So I I think that there is a bit of a difference when it comes to religion versus an atheism, because if you take like a left versus right, for instance, they're usually going to be debating over values, and neither side is going to, generally speaking, pretend that there is an objective moral standard to which they adhere to that the other doesn't. They're simply going to propose a superior subjective moral standard. But when it's atheists and religious people speaking, both sides are supposing an objective truth of the matter, and then they are they're arguing against the other side, saying that you are incorrect. What you're saying is not objectively true. What I am saying is objectively true. Like the most there may be very rare instances where an atheist will cop to more than a 1%, although I usually hear them using very extreme language to say what the percentage that they're wrong is. Like 0.001% maybe that I'm wrong, which basically means that there's 0% chance that I'm wrong, and there's a 100% chance that you're wrong, which is exceptionally dogmatic to me. But although I also think that because like I'm just for framing here, I'm a staunch agnostic. I think anybody who claims certainty one side or the other of this is inherently dogmatic. Um, because to proclaim that you know something which is unfalsifiable and unknowable is like you're already stepping outside of the realm of being logical on either side. And I just see that both sides are doing exactly the same thing. And I don't think that sort of building up your idea with Bible study and just sort of so you can get a better understanding of how other people understand these things. So the problem with for religious people is that these ideas are very big and they're very complicated and they lead to a lot of questions. And I think that when you're engaging with other people to sort of get how they're sort of reconciling their observations of the world with their own beliefs, um, then you're going to help strengthen your ability to have these kinds of thoughts. But I just think the atheists do exactly the same thing. It just maybe if you
So,
could give me better examples of how they don't.
so I'm so in online debates, it's talk. Let's say, for example, you have tangible debate subjects like left versus right, and you're right. They kind of debate policy and morality based on those things. Whereas in an intangible subject like religion, religion is it is quite an emotional, primal experience. It's inherently intangible, and that isn't something you can communicate well over, especially not using tribal online groups. It's not an appropriate subject essentially, and you can't debate it with the right delicacy that maybe that you can. It's not the it's never going to be appropriately discussed, or rarely will it be appropriately discussed in such tribal conditions. So really, what I'm trying to say is that when so I kept going back to Bible study because when the ideas that are purported to be true and the ideas that I'll give him a second, sorry.
I just given my wife a hug and a kiss. I'm still fully present.
Oh no, sorry, yeah. So during those kinds of real life environments like Bible study, and the ideas that are celebrated and elevated, the positions that are celebrated and elevated are often relate to kind of the human experience, the human kind of intangible emotional experience. And I believe that when you try and codify that, you are always going to say, I believe this. This is my emotional human experience. I believe this to be true. And this is how it relates to the universe. It does come across as quite dogmatic.
Okay, so I fully agree that the religious are dogmatic, 100%. You and I don't disagree whatsoever that religious people are inherently, like, tautologically dogmatic. I don't know how you could be religious without being dogmatic. It's like baked into the idea. But you don't seem to be contending with the, at least to me, I'm not understanding how you're contending with the idea uh, that I've taken the affirmative of, that atheists are equally dogmatic in this respect
So
because everything
where
that they
I see
propose and believe is without evidence as well.
so where the places and the environments I've seen atheists gather, and from my experience, seminars and mostly seminars at university. It's so when in those environments, the kind of idea, the processes and the ideas that are being elevated are ones that have a completely different tilt. They don't have the same. They're not emotional arguments that connect to the human experience. They're references to other body of work. They're references to field data. They're references. So that's the kind of environment that's, and it's not even right to describe them as atheist environments. These are just kind of biological biologists, chemists, and sociologists.
Well, but they're gathering for that
these are the
purpose,
people
right?
that. But my point is that these are the people that then maybe go around, turn, and then apply their own experience to. Essentially, they see religious people making arguments. They turn around from their academic background. They turn their experience at the religious argument, which is a completely different argument, and they try and apply their own academic background and perspective to what is essentially an emotional argument. And it can come across as dogmatic, but I think that if you follow the thought process, I think that the academics kind of background is it's essentially less. The arguments that they're putting forward aren't derived by I feel this, I believe it to be true. They're derived by their kind of background and their field data. Sorry, and their case studies.
Okay. So I guess I would argue that there's no evidence that they could give that would dismiss this unfalsifiable idea. Hence, that's one of the complaints that atheists make about the religious all the time, is that what you're proclaiming is unfalsifiable. So it wouldn't really matter what kind of academic approach they take. Ultimately, they can't falsify it anyways. I want to try to move away from like the anecdotes based on your observation by just asking like, can we maybe just define like what like like what, how do I want to word this? So when I say atheists, I guess I'm sort of appealing to the broad group of atheism, and then how they're generally so. Some generalization is going to be required here because just like when I say the religious, I'm also generalizing as well. So typically I'm going to be I'm talking about atheists that end up like doing debates with religious people. But if we want, I mean, if we can certainly both point out individual cases where there's a religious person who is particularly less dogmatic than your average, and you might find an atheist person that's going to be like particularly more or less dogmatic than the than the whole. But I guess I'm referring to the overall process by which you would become an atheist, and then also debate atheism or be compelled to debate atheism would be based on an emotional like an emotional calling that you're going to have, even if the reason why you're attesting that they are doing this is based on their academic backgrounds or their like professional experiences. This is sort of informing their emotional ideas as to why they need to go out and like spread this idea of atheism. Hey, what was that one mean?
I clicked the wrong one. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I was like, I make a bad point. Okay, but yeah, that was pretty much the end there.
So you mean that the way kind of atheists gather in debate circles in online? Okay, so
Or
my
at least
perception of
just to be clear, even if they don't, it's the thing that would pull somebody to go to these circles would be inherently emotional, and the arguments they're going to make, even if they're inspired by their academic backgrounds, are essentially going to be informed by their emotions more than their academic or professional backgrounds.
So, to take a slightly different tilt, there's the atheist communities online that I've seen were people congregating because they were members of religions. So people who had left Islam or left Mormonism. And in pretty much all the arguments that I see written is because they disagreed with traditions or kind of central tenets of that religion. Usually it's online, it's referencing homosexuality and the stance that the religion takes on that. So in that ecosystem, in that bubble of their arguments of atheist versus religion, it's purely about tradition and policy of their organized religion. So it's not an intangible argument. They don't explain their position in a dogmatic way. They explain it in a fact that it's an irreconcilable position, that maybe they're gay, but they're Muslim. And that's the line of argument that those people take.
Maybe you can square this up for me, but I can't imagine anything that I would call more of an emotional argument than saying that I decided that my entire religion is false because the traditions of the religion disagree with how I feel about myself or like about people that I'm attracted to. This is like a wholly emotional argument and doesn't refute the existence of the like divine inspiration for the doctrine itself, or the God. It's just that I don't like how people that also participate are participating in this, so I want to exit myself from this. And then somehow after I exit myself from this, I'm going to also declare that the entire doctrine is false and that there is no God. This just feels like almost like a manic ranting of somebody who feels rejected, which is inherently emotional. And I'm sympathetic to it, but like that's still what I think that it is. It's like when somebody stops being Christian or religious because their child dies in a car accident and they question God, even though despite the fact there's nothing in the Bible that would suggest that God would prevent your child from dying in a car accident, somehow this shakes their faith in their God because they have this idea in their head that God wouldn't let that happen. So people have like their own internal like dogmatic beliefs that are completely devoid from doctrine as well. And I think the atheists do too, just like that.
The way people build their faith is multitudes, and the way people build their faith within organized religion is, you say that it's a kind of an emotional reaction that caused them to. There are kind of
the examples you gave
emotions, and there, yeah, of course. But the kind of solid, the irreconcilable perspective differences that those people aren't exactly arguing they're arguing in just, this is my perspective and it doesn't align with the church.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't align with this set of doctrine. And what I'm trying to say is that I don't believe that to be inherently dogmatic.
So, like by strict definition, I'd say that like because dogma is authority proclaimed by a church, but I think that we've both been extending this out to mean like an unjustified authority, yeah. Like
Sure.
throughout this, okay. So as long as we agree on that, so yeah, then I would just say that that they are what they're doing is like rejecting the dogma based on how you feel is it's just a different dogma entering the scene here. And so it's a dogma. There's a new dogma in play saying that if something doesn't align with how I feel about this, then it's okay to reject it outright, and to then consider all the things that I held true about the doctrine is now false. This is inherently dogmatic because they're not taking the time to epistemologically rework their ideas about why these things were true in the first place. They're, instead of just sort of rejecting the reality that they were holding just moments before they decided to disconnect themselves from it. If there's like a total unraveling and they go through and epistemologically, rework the reality, I would say that you might have a point that this is never the case that I've ever heard. I've never seen or read any books about how this was the process in which somebody arrived at a loss of faith. It's usually one thing happens and then they dismiss everything all at once. And I do tend to find it to be the case that atheists are more often people of faith prior. So I think that this is something that crops up a lot. Although I'm not certainly not going to suggest that everybody who's an atheist was somebody who lost faith and that did this like poorly thought out like disjointing from the faith. But I still think that the examples that you gave are like inherently dogmatic. Could you suggest why that this is different by just like appealing to their own like emotional grievances?
Sure. So essentially the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of you are correct that not a lot of atheists
I'm sorry.
so a lot of atheists come to their position by going on an emotional journey that deviates from the teachings of their organized religion. But I think the atheist community is quite vast, and all of the religious people that I've known, they took the same, a very quite similar emotional path to build their faith. Whereas the atheists I've met and seen and experienced, some of them took the emotional path of having grievances with their church. Some of them, they saw that the church's kind of teachings didn't align with the kind of realities that they've seen, whether they're biologists or we can get into a whole kind of tangent on evolution or whatever. But some people don't take grievance with the evolution argument on an emotional level. People who've studied evolution take grievance with that argument because of their academic background.
Yeah. So I think that even the Catholic Church might maybe I'm wrong, but I think that the Catholic Church accepts evolution as a valid idea now as well. The religious people can just say, well, that's just how God does it. I don't think there's any conflict with like their dogma just adapts to the new information. Go, oh, okay, I guess we were wrong about that, but like there's no reason why a creator couldn't have just set evolution into the path of creation, and that's just how God did it. So if you want to say that, I'm certainly not going to suggest that there's not an undogmatic way that you can disprove certain truth claims that are within certain religious doctrines. This is certainly going to be the case. However, that doesn't mean it discredits the entire faith that it's built around, because in order to do that, like I said, we would have to claim that hermeneutics plays no role in forming religion. And obviously it does. If you see somebody that reads a religious doctrine and believes every single word for word, as strictly literal, that's how you get like Carrie's mom from the movie Carrie, where she locks her daughter in a closet to keep her from sinning so she doesn't go to hell. Like, I mean, nobody does that. And if they do, even the religious disown them, because at the end of the day, everybody who's religious is applying hermeneutics to their understandings of the teachings, hence things like Bible study and all that. And for atheists, they have to, they face similar explanations that they just don't have justifications for. Like even saying like, well, the universe got created from the Big Bang. doesn't really explain how the universe got created. It just explains that an event occurred and now things look like this. It doesn't explain what caused the Big Bang, or where the initial material for the Big Bang came from. This is not. They sort of pretend that this is an explanation, and it's not. It's super bad faith to suggest that it is. It's just a way of sidestepping their responsibility in answering the same question they demand from religious people, which I think is a great example of the bad faith dogmatism that atheists engage in.
So the arguments on kind of existentialism and why we're here is true. It's, I mean, the agnostic approach is really the only kind of approach that
Yes.
stands up right now, that we don't know. And arguments that any argument about that subject is going to be dogmatic inherently,
Yeah.
if you try and say yes or no. But
Yeah, and I
what
think that demanding an answer for the religious to square up their reasoning by putting it up against like the Big Bang is bad faith and dogmatic. Yeah, like we agree with that.
Yes, but that's one threads in kind of organized religions aren't just stories that say why we're here. They also describe code of conduct and so on. And the
Sure.
thing I think that stopped, I mean, why don't atheists become religious? Is because they've experienced or seen something within that religion or story, within that story, that contradicts with what they know, and and so that's, yeah, sorry, that's it.
Well, I think the more accurate reason to explain why somebody becomes atheist, in the case that somebody was previously religious or at least brought up religious and decides to take the path of atheism, is that I would just say that the stories that were presented to them when they were making the decisions just didn't really have the ability to emotionally hook them in. Like most of the time, the people that are religious are invested emotionally and socially, and I think that a lot of times people that are atheists are invested in being an atheist emotionally and socially as well. I don't really see anything different happening here. The main difference that I see between an atheist and a religious person is the sort of like the source of where they're getting their idea from. So with atheists, it's sort of like an uh, there's not like a central body, like a church, so to speak. It's more of like a collective of people that are telling religious people that they're wrong. That would probably be like the most standout authorities. Whereas religious people sort of have like a central authority to go off of, which would be like their doctrine or their church or something like that. But otherwise, I think that these things mirror each other like damn near perfectly. Neither one of them can really justify their core belief, whether it be from a doctrine suggesting that there is a God, or an atheist suggesting that because we had a massive explosion that created the universe means that God doesn't exist. Think these people are doing the exact same things, and claiming superiority over the other idea because like they have the better like source material or something.
So you mean that the atheist kind of groups you meet online come forward with their, I guess, papers? What do they come forward with?
Usually they come with low-hanging fruit, things that they take literally out of the doctrine of the believer and demand that they reconcile it. And if they try to just suggest that, like, well, I don't take that literally, well, then they go, okay, well, then you just get to arbitrarily pick and choose what to take literally. Yeah, of course, that's what everybody who's religious does. That's what you're doing with atheism. I was like, you're not explaining how anything got created. At least I have an explanation that, like, proclaims to actually be a creation story. Like at least this actually claims to solve the problem that you're challenging me to solve, whereas the atheist doesn't even offer an answer but pretends like they are. Um, so like yeah, I think when it comes to like creation, atheists are even more dogmatic than the believers are because at least they have a full explanation for what they're claiming.
So from my perspective, there are many different flavors of theist versus atheist debate. There's the one we discussed earlier, the kind of the people have left. There people are also people who left are now criticized. There's the online kind of thought leaders of atheism who do seem quite dogmatic. I've no real experience with these Jordan Peterson guys,
It's a
but
special case.
yeah, but there are many other arenas that this debate takes place. It's maybe, for example, people who are arguing against kind of theocratic policies of the Saudi state, or ways that religions are implemented in, just the policies and states of Saudi Arabia is the main one that stands out. It's as a state that is quite intertwined with religion. So essentially my point is that there are many different avenues and places where this kind of debate carries out. And in most of those avenues, say, for example, the Saudi state exercising their right to rule through the will of God is inherently dogmatic.
Sure, but this isn't like an atheist debate that they're having, though, right? They're debating about politics. They're debating whether or not faith-based ideas should be integrated into policy, which is ultimately politically or religiously motivated political discussion, right? It's not actually like that's not the religion. This isn't the faith that's being debated. It's about whether this is applicable into like legislation.
But in those areas, or in that place of debate, they're debating tenets that are being taken from the religion and enforced on people. And politics is the tool, but they're still the nail they're using to drive through is the religious tenet at the end of the day. And people arguing against that, while they might not characterize themselves as atheists, they
Oh, Wick, thank you
are
so much for
still
the raid.
arguing
Holy
against
shit.
that doctrinal
Bless you.
policy from a position of someone who doesn't exactly believe that policy.
Sure, but I would say that this is the same as anybody else who's proposing legislation based on any other emotional argument. A religious argument at the end of the day is just a emotional argument, just like any other, like when we have an abortion debate in the United States, both sides are arguing for their emotional reasoning as to whether or not it should be allowed. Now, if you say, if I was like, well, it's morally wrong, sure. But anybody who's proclaiming like religious ideology into law is saying that it's morally right, and they just happen to get their morals from religious doctrine. It's the same thing as any other political discourse. It's just like, where are you getting your inclinations from? And I don't think that all of a sudden makes it like a like fundamental tenet of the religion, or like a fundamental job of the religious to inscribe their religion into law. It happens to be the case a lot that it does happen, but I think that atheists, given the opportunity, would scrub all religion from law just as well as the religious, given full control and to have their way, they would enforce their religious ideas into law, right? Both sides still doing exactly the same thing as each other. Equally dogmatic, right?
I would say no. The people who have have disagreements with the kind of religious policies being put forward, their background is less organized and they've got more of a kind of diversity of backgrounds. People who take front a kind of religious policy being put into legislation. So people who want legislation to be put forward on a religious basis, they come from the same backgrounds. Whereas their opponents are criticizing it on maybe humanitarian reasons. Maybe they're just political opponents who don't believe in it. And so that essentially they're not all doing it. One side is quite doctrinally centralized and dogmatic. And in this case, the other side isn't.
Well, I guess the problem that I'm having here is that the people who are opposing like religious ideology being put into law aren't necessarily being representative of atheists when they do that. So, like you don't have to be an atheist. You could be fully religious and still be dead set against the religion being enforced via law. It just would go against your non-religious moral principles. And so I don't see this as claiming that atheists aren't being as dogmatic in this respect. You're just talking about people opposing like theocracy. That's it, which I wouldn't say is a good metric to gauge the comparative dogmaticism between the religious and atheists. Would you agree with that assessment?
Somewhat. So the way religion is kind of expressed is it expresses itself in many different kind of arguments and areas, from evolution to kind of political action. And in those avenues, I'm saying that the people opposing it are opposing from quite a few different perspectives. In the online debate, atheism versus theism, I do agree with you. It does sound like quite a kind of polarized, dogmatic,
Yeah.
kind of debate going on.
So what
But
I'm saying is,
what I'm trying to say, sorry, go ahead.
well, I just wanted to.
No, finish your thought, John.
Okay.
Ozzy was interrupting you.
So what I'm trying to say is that there are many kind of
He's right. I
there are
was.
many places that this one debate takes place in, many styles, many forms. The online one, very dogmatic, does sound quite dogmatic, quite polarized. But when you start to get into the real world and these ideas start to get kind of mixed into legislation, and not just legislation, but kind of relationships with people, the criticisms of the religious ideas come from once you start to leave the online space, the criticism comes from many different places, from people who disagree on a multitude of different levels.
Um. So there's a couple issues with using this. Like, I don't think that what you're saying here is incorrect insofar as the things that you've stated seem to be factually true. However, I don't think they apply to the disagreement that we're having because one, this isn't an inherent atheist versus religious like ideology clashing here. This is a particular flavor of religious idea getting pushed into law, and then the people that oppose it. You could have people that are for that religious ideology getting pushed into law who are atheists. You could have people that are religious that are against religion being put into law that are religious. So this isn't really like a good metric to say like are atheists just as bad faith and dogmatic as religious people are. It seems like this is just talking about how people interact when religion tries to get put into law. And we're not really able to clearly define the sides here, saying these are the religious people, these are the atheist people. So, like what you're saying certainly happens, but it's not a good way to come to a conclusion as to how we can apply it to our disagreement.
So there's one angle that I do agree with you that there's many flavors of kind of belief, and individuals exist on a kind of a spectrum of kind of believing their certain
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
But once you start to group people into tribes, for example, a Mormon might look at Mitt Romney and say, "Oh, I don't agree with this fellow at all," but he still represents Mormons. He is one of the most famous Mormons to non-Mormons, and people might not like that within Mormonism, but it's undeniable to say that he does represent Mormonism in in kind of quite a tribal sense.
Sure. But I don't think his behavior. I don't think that you could take some like actions that Mitt Romney does and say that this is how Mormons are. This would be too broad, right? It would be better to look at the collective and look at the collective behavior and see if they line up or not, and say that like yeah, this is typical for a Mormon. Because I mean, he may be a representative, but he could be a rogue Mormon, right?
Yeah, but that's not what the argument he's making
Well,
is. He's asking. No. You asked me
okay.
about the dodging questions thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
He's basically saying Mitt Romney is the guy that represents Mormons by and large. When you think of a Mormon, you think of Mitt Romney. That's the argument he's making, not what you're trying to put him into.
Right. Well, I was trying to grant that by saying he is a representative of that, but that doesn't mean that his behavior is going to be indicative of that which is true to Mormon ideology.
But what is true is not what is felt. For example, someone in New York who has no real kind of experience with day-to-day Mormons, how Mitt Romney's actions tell that person a lot. Mitt Romney's kind of belief system tell that person a lot. So that in a perfect world, sure, we'd be able to kind of know perfectly the feelings of all people in all groups. But unfortunately, we kind of have to devolve to leaders. And my point is, in this circumstance, he's the tribal leader.
Okay. So if I want to take that line of thinking, then I could say that Matt Dillahunty and Richard Dawkins would be representative of atheists. Would you agree with that?
In an online kind of bubble sense, because not everyone's familiar with these, but yes.
Well, I mean, Dillahunty sure would be significantly more online, but Richard Dawkins, he was big before like online religion discourse going on. He put out books well before the advent of like large scale communication with the internet, right? So, or
Yeah,
are you
I
just,
imagine so.
as I say, if I can't use Dawkins, then I feel like I can't appeal to there being any authority amongst the atheists. So if I even look at Dawkins, I would say that he is rigorously dogmatic in his anti-theistic beliefs. He's the kind of guy that says that there is a less than 1% chance that there was a creator, which is he's making that number up for one. He has no way by which to measure that probability, but he very strongly proclaims this, especially when he's dismissing the religious. And I think that this is expressly dogmatic. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I mean, he does sound like it does, from what you've characterized, it sound quite dogmatic. I've not any real experience with what he's done, but yes, he does sound quite dogmatic.
Oh,
But
I would say he's probably like the progenitor of like mainstream atheism. That's my view and understanding of him.
but then again, we're coming back to the online bubble
No,
of
no, no, no,
that online.
not just online. That's what I'm saying. That Richard Dawkins made a name for himself. Oh, Christopher Hitchens too. These people aren't just like online figures. Certainly, they're going to like anybody who's a public figure
Okay.
who isn't like in holding an office is going to end up online.
All right. What's the difference between these figures and Mitt Romney? You've rejected Mitt Romney in the same way that I think you're vaulting these figures, Strauss.
Oh, I was saying if I'm accepting Mitt Romney, then can I also put these other people in the same category?
Okay.
That's why that's the only reason I've invoked like atheist authority here.
I just wanted to check.
Okay, is that fair?
Yeah, I mean it's whatever. I just wanted to make the clarification. That's it.
Okay. Um, so I feel like anybody who's not holding like a political or like high church position, like we could just end up referring to as online figures then, because like there isn't going to be any world leader who's like an atheist, as far as I know. At least that's not going to. They're not reaching me here. Like I'm not aware of them. The internet's just like the best way of like knowing who people are. So I guess even if they were
So
just online ones, like I guess I don't know what the problem would be if atheists are most represented online anyways. If I want to go to where do I find atheists online? Okay, I'm going to look at the representatives from there because that's just where I'm going to find
but
them.
so in that kind of circumstance, when people want to get into an argument about being against religion or for religion, they look to people like Richard Dawkins. But my other point is that the kind of the doctrines and the flavors of religious thoughts that are argued against, they're argued against by countless thought leaders, by countless groups. And this I hate to characterize it as an only online thing, but that's where the majority of this style of debate takes place. Whereas in kind of outside of that circle, there are many other kind of there are many other kind of arguments that take place regarding religion.
Sure, but okay. So you're saying outside of the internet, there's a lot of conversations that happen involving religion. If can you maybe give me an example of like an atheist arguing with a theist offline that isn't going to mirror the kinds of interactions that I'm talking about? Because like when you talk about policy, this is politics, and either side that happens to align with theism or atheism doesn't necessarily have to describe to that ideology to be on that side. I would say that both sides of the political thing that we're talking about are also quite diverse. They're going to have a lot of different academic and professional backgrounds, and their religious or non-religious ties may not necessarily get them representing the side that would align with that because there's a different ideological thing on the table.
So sorry. So the idea that I'm trying to get at is that atheism is quite a loose umbrella that encapsulates, and so many people so many groups would come under that without identifying themselves as atheists. When you debate someone who identifies truly and strongly as an atheist, they
Maybe the
may
Twitch
be
follows.
quite dogmatic, but the other groups that fall under this umbrella that may not see themselves as truly atheist, they would not engage in quite the same dogma or in such a dogmatic way.
It seems
And
like
they
you're
don't. I don't believe that.
Sorry. Okay.
Sorry,
Sorry. Did you
I
finish?
don't believe.
I don't want to interrupt you.
So my final point is that many different groups exist under the umbrella kind of atheism, or they kind of have ideas that rhyme with atheism. A lot of those groups do not engage in a dogmatic way.
Okay. So it seems like what you're telling me is that in order to not be dogmatic, they are now something separate that isn't quite atheist, which almost sounds like a concession to me saying that that if they are actually atheist, then they are dogmatic. But just for the sake of simplicity, we can get rid of a lot of this other stuff that we're talking about. Can you give me a justification for being an atheist that is not going to be inherently dogmatic?
So a justification for being. So, for example, if a church so the religion, the local area that you live in, if they have tenets that you disagree with,
Mm-hmm.
from a professional standpoint, and there are many different journeys to disagreeing with tenets in a religion. Maybe it doesn't maybe your professional experience doesn't shows it to be wrong, for example, or you emotionally don't agree with it. So those are many different kind of paths to being in. But essentially, I think there are lots of different flavors, but yeah, sorry, that's it.
So you're saying that somebody decides to be atheist because they don't agree with how a particular church does something, or they don't agree with a particular tenet emotionally, that this is not dogmatic?
I don't believe so. I think it's because this person has come to they've put their own personal and emotional experience. They take that in their mind, they compare it to what these religious people are saying, and they don't match. So they think, I'm not part of that tribe.
This isn't so much about being a part of this individual tribe here. It's about the rejection of the idea of not just the doctrine, but of the idea of a creator, the idea of a higher being. They're rejecting a whole bunch of things based on the premise that they're going to be shitty to me if I'm gay. This seems extremely dogmatic to me. They're saying because I'm going to be uncomfortable if I engage with people that share these ideas, then I should reject every single idea that they have. This is that just seems absurd to me. They're not rejecting it based on any like they're not having like premise conclusion here. They're just going purely based off my feelings I don't think I'm going to like this, so I'm going to reject all the ideas that they have. I don't know what to call that if not dogmatic.
But what you described is just one path.
Well,
The
right, but that was the
homosexual.
example you gave me
Oh, sure, but there might be, there
to
might be a religion
explain.
that says that, oh, the rocks speak to us, and geologists might say, well, that's silly. I don't believe that because that clashes with my professional experience of what I've seen. And that person's not doing it from an emotional perspective. They're doing it from kind of their perception of the world and the things they've seen.
Well, rejecting a specific religion doesn't make you an atheist. Otherwise, every religious person would be an atheist because they don't believe in every single religion. Saying that I don't believe in your religion, the part of your religion that says that rocks talk, so I'm just going to consider this all nonsense, isn't proclaiming yourself to be an atheist. That's me saying that this guy has some fucked up ideas. I don't believe a word he says. That's it. That's all you're really saying there. This isn't a justification for like. I guess I just want to reiterate the question. If you could give me a single example of how somebody could arrive at the concrete conclusion that atheism is correct, without invoking some dogmatic reasoning for doing so, I would concede this whole argument.
So, so essentially, people don't choose atheism out of a kind of global understanding of all perspectives. They look at their own perspective. They look at the local cultural perspective that's there to them. So if you're living in Iran, it's Islam. If you're living in the United States, it's Christianity. And so an Iranian atheist, they might be call themselves an atheist, but they're arguing against the Iranian Islamic perspective. And someone in the United States who is an atheist, they would be arguing against the flavor of Christianity that's prevalent in the United States. Is like I go back to my point is that it's not a cohesive group. It doesn't have one doctrine. It's people arguing against their own, what they see in their town and their villages.
Well, no, being an atheist does reject those, but it also rejects any notion of a creator, any divine beings as well. It accepts it doesn't only reject the most prevalent religion to them in their like to them locally, but it also proclaims that no ideology that's centered around a divine being and or creator is also incorrect. This is what being an atheist is. It's not like you can say I'm anti-Christian and you can be Jewish. You can be anti-Muslim and be Christian. And like none of these are going to necessitate that you are now an atheist. So I think that it's totally fine to be against certain tenets of religion, certain religions in general. But once you step into the idea of atheism, you're going to have to do so by way of dogmatism. Like there is going to be something that is unjustified, that you're going to be discounting these ideas from an unjustified position. And in almost exclusively, you're going to pretend to have justification for doing so. Because if you don't have justification, then you say you're agnostic, which is what I am. I just say like, I know that I can't know that. I can lean one way or the other, but also admit that I don't know. I met a guy who's Christian who said that, who's also agnostic, and I respected the hell out of that. It's like, I think I'm right, but I know that I might be wrong. I'm like, oh shit, I love you. You're my favorite Christian ever.
I think you're setting quite high ideological barriers to being an atheist. In my is in that people in Iran arguing against Islam, wearing the colors of atheism.
Well,
That's the name that they've decided to give their set of kind of anti-Islamic ideals. And my overlying point is that the kind of group of atheism that it's this all the way down. It's not people who've decided to take huge amounts of time into learning their new faith, or not faith, but their new doctrine, atheism. It's people who are arguing their local issues. Those are the atheists.
well, I'm going off of like definitionally what an atheist is. Like, if you're gonna change the framing to somebody who just rejects the religion of the locale, um, I still think that oftentimes there's going to be a strong dogmatic pull there. But my main argument is the atheist being a person who disbelieves or lacks belief in the existence of God or gods, to be ultimately a dogmatic position, and that it is usually backed up by bad faith arguments for maintaining that position, because ultimately the rationale for it is dogmatic.
But when Dawkins argues against God, he's not arguing against Buddhist God. He's arguing against Christian God, the Christian cultural
No, he's
style of
he's
God.
arguing against the existence of any god. But just for clarity,
Okay,
Buddhists
it's a
don't have a
bad
god.
example, sorry, but yeah,
It's one
it's
of the great non-theistic religions.
well, yeah, but it's essentially these thought leaders, these atheist thought leaders, they're arguing against that. They're not
No,
they're not taking a kind of worldview.
no,
I
no,
don't
no.
believe they
This
are.
is just not true. Like, you take one of the most prolific atheist that's known around is Matt Dillahunty. He will proclaim that he'll argue with Muslims, he'll argue with Christians. It doesn't matter if you're selling God, he ain't buying. And that's what being an atheist is. If you just, like I said, if you're going to reframe atheism to anybody who rejects the religion of their locale, well, you plop a Christian into an Islam dense country, they're either going to convert or they're going to somehow be an atheist that believes in Jesus, which seems to be a just an overwhelming contradiction to me. You dislocate anybody from one culture and put them into another culture, and they can still maintain their belief in a higher power and be an atheist. I, I just feel like that you would just need to have a different descriptor than that, because I feel like you wouldn't be comfortable using atheist in that context, even though ultimately it's the same scenario. It's just not how that person ended up arriving at the rejection.
So I do this. Uh, I do think we each operate in our own cultural spheres first and foremost, and when we create ideas and we participate in ideas, it's based on the ideas that we've seen and a reaction to the ideas that we've seen. And so it's incorrect. I do think it's incorrect to bucket all atheists together as people who are making the same arguments, people who are arguing the same thing.
Uh,
They're
I,
arguing.
that's not what I'm doing. I'm saying that any argument that you can make against the existence of any god, like of all gods, is going to inherently be dogmatic. There's no way to escape uh, making the claim that you know that there's no creator, that you know that there's no higher power, that isn't ultimately dogmatic. So I'm not saying that all atheists must think this way. They must take this path to get there or anything like that. But I'm saying that in order to qualify as an atheist, definitionally, you must reject the idea of any and all gods and higher powers. This is like the defining feature, and you can spread out from that as far as you want. But this is like, if you believe in a god or the possibility of gods or a god, then you're not an atheist. You might just be somebody who sees very real issues with the but by the way that people are interacting with religion in your area, in which I would say, even if you are religious, fight back against it. You could be a strict Christian and see that there's fucked up shit going on with the church down the street and fight against it. And I think that makes you a good Christian. It doesn't make you a good atheist, right?
It comes back. I think this comes back to our
Scared the shit
kind of
out of me.
previous discussion that is no one can truly say the reality of our existence,
What? But
and
they do.
to say yes or no. Well, yes, but so when saying yes or no is equally dogmatic.
Yeah, that's what I've
But
been saying.
no, but I'm saying that there are other environments where theism is criticized, and in those environments where theism and the tenets of theism the traditional practices of theism. I'm saying that a religion doesn't stand just on we believe in God. In the churches that I've been to, the nature of God is talked about so very rarely. 90% of what they talk about in churches that I've been to is the cultural practices, the emotional experience.
Sure, but
And so God
which
is
is
not a
which a
central
lot of it's
part
dogma,
there.
right? Sure, I'm not disagreeing with that at all. What I'm disagreeing with you about is that, but for in order to be an atheist, um, you're not just going to be disagreeing with like as a religious person, you can be a strict Christian and argue about different parts of Christianity. You can argue about how literal we should take certain passages. You could argue about the historical truths in the Bible, both of us being Christian all day. That doesn't make either of us an atheist, but our core position that there is a higher being and that there is some truthful purpose for this doctrine to exist. This is what groups us in together in being a member of this religion. In order to be an atheist, you must disavow the idea of there being any gods or like higher powers. And I'm saying that this conclusion can only be arrived at through a dogmatic path, the same way that a religious person would arrive at their religious path. And I would still like, I guess, like one more time, I would challenge you to give me an example where somebody can come to the conclusion that there is no God or higher power without invoking some sort of dogmatic reasoning. Because like that's all that needs to be answered for me, and I automatically lose this debate.
So from what I've seen, the way religious people come to build their relationship with God, build their faith, they do acts of service for each other. We talk about the nature of the doctrine. So that's how they build their belief in that God is real, in whatever form that may be. But so for atheists, they're not going to argue against kind of the top of the pyramid of that emotional journey, so to speak. They might argue against the day-to-day speakings of the church, and that would be their act of diverging from the church. And that's not a and the routes that they take and the styles in which they attack those day-to-day teachings and speakings, it's not dogmatic, but it still represents the kind of it represents the kind of antithesis of that religion. So for example,
Oh, okay, go ahead.
so I go back to the example of a religious person building their faith in their gods. And I think that people who saying there is no God is the final step for an atheist. You have people who are on that path arguing those points. Maybe they don't say there is no God, but they're still on the path away from their established religion. And you can't, and if someone's if someone's still kind of learning on that path, it doesn't exclude them from being under that kind of umbrella of atheism.
It does. If they believe that there is a God, they are not an atheist. This is the defining factor. This is the qualifier. You could say that I'm having a lapse of faith. This happens to most people that are religious throughout their lives. They feel their faith weakening. They're having a lapse in faith. They're finding it very difficult to believe, and they usually, engage with the church, or they end up becoming atheist. They either go to the church to strengthen their faith, or they end up losing all of their faith and they become atheist. But ultimately, the way that they get there is going to be rather dogmatic. Almost every example I can see of somebody who is losing faith ends up losing their faith is something that has no contradiction with their prior beliefs. They just sort of like don't want to do it anymore. Or like the child dying example. There's no part of the ideology that would promise that that wouldn't happen, but somehow this shatters the ability to believe. This is this is just sort of like taking out your anger on God by saying he doesn't exist, which is purely emotional. There's no reasoning here. There's no like logical conclusion that's being arrived to come to this conclusion. And I would say that any path you take to atheism, you're going to be listening to ideas about people that are ultimately going to be unjustified in disproving the existence of a god, or like you can pick apart like literal definitions or literal understandings of a religious doctrine. But at the end of the day, too, like that's still not going to stand up to like what almost everybody's going to engage with when they're engaging with the doctrine. Like you, at some point, you have to cover your eyes in order to become an atheist from religion. Like the only religious or the only non-dogmatic atheists that I think that can exist are people that are never like really introduced to the idea of religion at all. But once that idea is introduced there, in order to outright reject it, it has to be based on some unjustified position.
And I don't believe that there are, when people take the stories of the church and they poke holes in it, they're doing so in good faith. For the most part, I think, from their perspective and their backgrounds, I don't believe that to be unjustified.
The only insofar as the person doing it, the person that they're arguing with, suggests that these stories are literal. If the person doesn't proclaim that everything in the Bible is literal, I'm just using the Bible for example. They say that the Bible is word for word literal, and then you go, okay, let's talk about Noah's Ark. This is good faith. This can be approached in good faith because they're claiming that everything in here happened. But like they're making a truth statement about the word, and so now the word can be falsified. But if they're not, and they say like most people have an understanding of the religious doctrine, is that there's some sort of hermeneutics at play. Maybe some of these things might be true, but for the most part, it's really good to just consider this to be parables and syllogies, just different ways for us to kind of like get the ideas that God wants us to have in our head. And then we have things like the 10 Commandments, which are strict rules for how we ought to live our life.
But I think picking and not picking and choosing, but saying that your doctrine shouldn't be taken literally isn't an admission of kind of strength in your position, or at least the position of doctrinal and ideological kind of purity. If you're saying that your core text shouldn't be taken literally.
Well, I mean, I have a whole
quite
explanation for that. I think that hermeneutics is the only possible way that any of the like old religious texts can be interpreted. Otherwise, it falls into obscurity because they're clearly not true. But if you look at them from a position of being interpretable, I can just give you the quick rundown. If the Bible, for example, was real, it would have to be the kind of thing that God inspired to be written, because obviously he didn't write it, he doesn't have a hand, so that every single person who picks it up seeking God will get exactly what God intended for them in that exact moment, despite mistranslations, despite different things that are going to go wrong throughout the process. God is so perfect and divine that he inspired the initial works to be written so that when it gets propagated and through all the chaos that will happen since then, every single person throughout time and history can pick it up and get what God meant for them to get from it if they're truly seeking him. This would be a way in which the Bible works perfectly and in and of itself expresses the true glory that's proclaimed of the Christian God. And I don't believe this, but this would be the thing that I would believe if I was Christian, right?
Sure.
And this is,
but
you can't really argue against that.
And that's how they build their emotional relation. And do you say, oh, it can't be taken literally, and but we still feed back onto it, and we build our emotional relationship with the universe, with our concept of God.
Yeah, but the explanation that I just gave you attests that it could not be. If the Bible was literal, it couldn't be from God, because it sets itself in a position to where it might be wrong. But the way that I interpret what the Bible must be, if it does if it is divinely inspired, it has to be metaphorical. It has to be written in a way that is so cryptic and obscure that it's basically used as a codex for every single individual to have a connection with God when they use it. Otherwise, it just doesn't make any sense at all.
So essentially, yeah, people are taking this metaphor and they're building their emotional relationship with their tribe and their version of the universe.
Mm-hmm. It's
Why
dogmatic.
can't people's? But why can't people's? When people do the opposite, there are so many different ways and different pathways that they can do the opposite in.
Well, I'd
Not
say
all of them are
that the path that
dogmatic.
they might take, but at the end, when they get to the point where they dismiss or where they disavow the existence of any gods or the idea of a creator, they are ultimately making a dogmatic leap of faith when they do that because they know that they can't know, and they're just sort of like picking it because they like it better.
I don't believe that the atheist versus theist debate is purely about the existence of God.
No, the conclusions
That's
that lead you to being an atheist is dogmatic. That's what I'm saying. The ultimate
but
conclusion.
I believe that might be one that might be a major argument to be had.
Are
But
you
there are many
atheist?
other. No, I'm agnostic.
Oh, well, what the fuck? Okay, that's so funny. We're both agnostic, arguing for the opposite side.
I think that I have a question. Do you guys think I was wondering? I have some people because I'm also streaming this
Yeah.
who want to come yell at Drazi um, for some of his takes. Would it be okay if we added somebody? Because I think that we are kind of entering into a loop. So
I
either
was.
I think we should conclude
Yeah,
or we should try to add some other perspectives in. If
Um,
that's all viable.
do you want to do closing thoughts, John? I think we're starting to loop too.
You know.
yeah, I think so. Um, yeah, I think
Um,
I've kind of said everything I could.
yeah, go ahead. I was just gonna ask if you wanted to go first with closing thoughts.
Sure. I think that the kind of pathways and the general umbrella of atheism includes many kind of disparate groups, and people can take a multitude of different kind of logical and emotional pathways to get to that perspective. And not all of them are dogmatic. I do agree that when you get to the argument of challenging, I'm right, no, you're wrong, any tribal debate of that nature is going to be dogmatic, regardless if it's atheist versus Christian or atheist versus theist.
Okay.
And that's it. But yeah,
Um,
thanks for listening.
yeah. I asked for first part of my closing statement. I would say that thanks for having this debate with me. I thought it was fun. I still think
Yeah.
that I would have really liked to have seen a good example of the kind of atheistic conclusion that doesn't rely on some sort of like dogmatic jump. I concede that there is theoretically a way for this to happen. However, I would say that if this does like arise, that they would ultimately be, if not dogmatic, it would be factually incorrect. Like if somebody said, I found I found this piece of glass and through it I can see the truth of the universe and it showed me that there's no God. I would just say, okay, well, um, I would say that this is just as valid, or this is probably just not true. We can examine it and there's no truth of the universe in it. So I just think that you're coming to the wrong conclusion because you're crazy. While this may not be dogmatic, you might think that you are factually correct. You're ultimately just like incorrect about your uh, processing the information that led you to that conclusion. So yeah, thank you very much, and thanks,
Great.
Rezi.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, thank you,
I'm
Resi.
actually,
Thank you so
I
much.
am curious. Do you want to argue with somebody? Like, people are
Yeah.
thinking,
I was just gonna tell
uh,
John, like, you are free to stay here for that.
yeah,
Feel free to leave if you don't want to deal with other people.
yeah.
This is Twitch poll, and shit
John,
can get kind of
there,
unhinged.
the thing,
You're
John,
very polite.
they mostly want to yell at Drazi. I don't think anybody's actually that mad at you. They just want to yell at Drazi. So if you want to watch the pillory, then yeah, I'll invite some people to the server and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'll stick around to watch the
Yeah, a little
vigorous
bit.
debate.
Yeah, vigorous. All right, sounds good. All right, well,
Good
first
luck,
person
Grazi.
that wanted to
Thank you.
join Ice Beans. It's not on my server. The first person that wanted to join was Ice Beans.
Oh, I know Ice Beans.
So I just invited them to the server. So whenever they end up joining, because they're in my VC in my Discord.
Also, if you want to
that's-
come in here and yell at me, the least you could do is give me a follow on YouTube, Kicker,
Okay.
Twitch. Just saying.
Good job.
Common courtesy.
Yeah. So I mean, I have like so I'm gonna actually yell at you, Drowsy. So atheist is without God, right?
It is the disbelief or
Absence.
disavowal
It's
of God or
would you
gods.
say
Yeah.
that somebody who like just doesn't know of God or gods has no concept of it, like
I mentioned them.
like yeah, but like so like let's say you literally don't have any connection to all this, like you're living in Subnautica world, there's no God or anything like that, right?
Yeah, I addressed that
Because
in the
like
debate.
yeah. So that you're born into that world, you have no idea of any of these things. That is justification of atheism without dogmatism, right?
Yeah, I did talk about that, and I said that once
Okay.
they're approached with the idea and they make a decision there, it's going to ultimately be dogmatic.
Yeah, but that's no. Okay. All right. Well, let's bring in Ice Beans. That's the first person. Okay.
Okay.
So. You have to drag them in. It's not my server.
Oh, I'm just not used to hosting where people like
Just
come in
give
like
me,
that.
just get, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, you're fine.
When you
They're
said
just
they're not
there.
in the server, I was thinking they were talking about your server.
No,
Yeah.
they're here. They're just in your general. They need to drag you up. Yes.
Yep. Hey, Beans. I
Hey,
heard
give
you
me
wanted to
just
tell me how cool I was.
hold on, my sound just decided to stop working at this.
You're okay. I'm gonna keep
No
yelling at
problem.
Drazi. Okay, so it's not
Oh, I figured it out.
dogmatic because you're making a
sorry.
decision that isn't based on like some group collective push, right? Dogmatic means that there is like some core ideology that has been gone ahead and agreed upon. If you don't have that core ideology, you're not making a dogmatic decision. You are making therein either a selfish decision or a pragmatic decision.
Well, that's why in the debate too, I asked if because him and I seem to be on the same page when I'm referring to dogmatism, which would the sort of like extended definition for dogmatism that I'm using
Yeah.
is an
What is
idea
it?
that is ultimately unjustified, and it's based on some sort of like
Okay, so that's
unjustified
like
or irrational push, like emotions or something like that.
okay, but that's okay.
And we had
Alright.
agreed on that within the context of the debate.
All right.
Okay, can I? Okay, this is very frustrating. Hi, Drowsy.
Hello.
This was very frustrating to listen to because, and Rezi pointed this out, right? Atheism is just simply lack of belief. Okay.
Yeah.
You have this entire time have been talking about Gnostic atheism, that people who say I know there is not a god, when I would say the majority of atheists, including me, I would consider myself an agnostic atheist. I'm saying I don't know if there's a god. I don't have sufficient proof, and I don't think it's possible to know if there's a god or not. Usually agnostic atheism, that they believe some combination of those three statements.
Okay.
Okay,
I
you
did
are talking
differentiate
about
between
Gnostic.
agnostic. I did differentiate between agnostics
but you are,
and
but when you
atheists.
say atheist, okay, but Razi, when you say atheist, like the whole time you
I defined it. I defined it.
But why? That's not what the majority of the atheist people
Okay,
are.
what you're talking about is perfectly fitted by the term agnostic. And if you want to just say, like, well, when you say atheist, you're actually talking about agnostics. No, I'm not. I defined atheist in the debate several times. I qualified what
Okay.
I meant by atheist several times. And if you want to group agnostics into there, sure, I'm not talking about them. I'm agnostic. I think that being agnostic is the only rational statement to make about the existence or non existence of God or gods. That's it. There's no other
Well,
possible rational
no.
conclusion to make.
Okay, how about this though, right? I'm a theist.
Hmm.
Okay, I don't have a dogma. I have experiences that I take on faith, which is without logic. It's just something that you believe in for whatever reason it is. That's what faith is. Like if you just like get like a feeling that if you throw a fucking coin on the ground and it's going to give you good luck for a day, right? Like that doesn't require some greater dogma around it. That's just you going ahead being pattern seeking and whatever. I have my experiences which make me a theist, so I can assert that that exists. I can't assert to other people that that exists. But for myself, my arrival at theism comes from a non dogmatic thing, rather based on the experiences I have.
Well, you're a theist, so my arguments against you wouldn't apply because I'm arguing
Why?
that because my argument is that atheists are just as dogmatic as the religious are.
Okay, but like I'm a religious, so like
Right.
then I'm proving that there is no dogmatism. Therefore, atheists therefore don't need to be dogmatic to begin with to have their beliefs.
No, no, no. You're proclaiming a belief in something. Okay?
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah, for
if you
myself,
want to try to
without
the
dogma.
reason and when I say the religious, I am speaking
Uh-huh.
of the broad religious group. And
Okay,
I said
here's
I even
here's
said
a
in there
question.
that there can be
Yeah, yeah,
somebody
yeah.
who's religious that has a low level
Uh-huh.
of that. And also, one thing
Uh-huh.
that I've always said, always, is that I will never debate somebody about religion if the
Yeah.
purpose for religion comes from personal revelation. Because
Okay,
if you
cool.
were to deny your personal revelation, that makes you an insane person. You're going to deny your sensory perception
Mhm.
because of anything. We
Yeah,
call you crazy in every other instance. So you're fine
fine.
to believe what you
So
believe.
here's my question.
You don't have a choice.
Do you carry the same weight to like science and like, all of those like kind of more rigid things that we can give definition to?
So it depends. So sometimes science tries to proclaim things that it just simply can't. Like the Big Bang, for
Such
example.
as
The Big Bang does
okay.
not explain the creation of the universe. Like it doesn't proclaim to describe why
Well,
why existence is.
that's not necessarily true because it's about like the idea of an energy neutral system, right? Which goes and fits within thermodynamics. The Big Bang, as postulated as like the creation of both light and dark matter, and the way that we look at how antimatter creation can occur through the generation of high, energy inputs, right? We do know that we can have an energy neutral universe which still ends at zero. Like everything ends at zero at the bottom of all of existence, right? And that is part of what the Big Bang is that you can have the Big Bang that does fit in with all scientific doctrine that has a zero as long as you have the alter antimatter universe, which would then go ahead and cause a collapse of zero of the whole thing.
Okay. It doesn't suggest that existence
Mhm.
is because of the Big Bang, though, but it pretends that it does. When people
Okay.
talk about the Big Bang, it is proclaimed that this is the reason
Yeah,
why anything exists, but it
well,
doesn't give
it's
an answer to
it's
how that existed to
wrong.
begin with.
So you're misinterpreting science because the Big Bang is a theory, not a law. A law is something that
Sure,
can be proclaimed. A theory is something that is postulated and tested against, right?
sure. Like aside from the fact that I don't subscribe to the Big Bang theory, anyways, I think the universe always existed. So that's that. I'll just put that aside and just say that my issue with science invoking the Big Bang only comes into play when it's used as a counter to the idea of a creator, which does happen often.
Well, that's because the arguments are logic versus faith, and you can't have. There's no confluence between logic and faith. Those which we go ahead and assert with morals
Yeah, this is the
are not
misapplication
things
of
that we're
logic.
looking with Yeah, but no, this isn't. No, morals are not logical. They are just faith-based, right?
No, I'm
Like
saying the jump
Big
from the
Bang.
Big Bang to saying that this would replace something like a God for creation is a
But
misappropriated
nobody's saying
conclusion
that
from the logic.
the Big Bang is like, yeah, God is creation versus like what? God is like overbearer, God is, like what are the other 99 names, like that you could go ahead and come up with God. Like it's not just
Well, it's
creator.
what that's why I
All
said
right.
well, but in the instance where the Big Bang is being used to argue
Uh-huh.
against the religious, it's replacing the creator.
Well, but
That's why they
nobody's
do that.
using the argument of the Big Bang against the religious. We're using the argument of the Big Bang. I'm using it
That's what I'm
because
referring to.
you're the one that's using the argument of the Big Bang to make your point. You are
I
doing the
used it to answer your
dogmatism.
question. I used it to answer your question.
Yeah, but you used it to answer my question. Therefore, you're using it as an argument, right?
I'm using it as an
You
example of where I don't like people applying science. But generally,
Mhm.
I do adhere to the ideas that science puts out. Sure.
Do you believe in do you believe in gravity? We don't have like gravity is a theory. Like do you give the same gravitas to gravity
As
like the Big Bang?
gravity is an observable phenomenon. So
No,
there's
it's
something
not.
happening here.
It's actually not. It's
There's
legitimately
something
not.
happening and we refer to it as gravity.
Yeah, but we don't even know if gravity is even happening in the first place, or if it's just like some weird local constraint within physics. Because there is a lot of models of physics that say that even these things are not fundamental to begin with, and that they aren't like shift within even the observable universe that we have.
Hang
So
on.
therefore, it's not only just a theory; it's something you technically have to take on faith because we can't even discover the gravitron or some working solution that actually goes ahead and
Yeah,
defines what that
I
is.
understand that that we have not found. Well, they kind of said that they discovered the particle that's responsible for gravity. I don't necessarily believe that.
They
But
no,
anyways,
Wait,
they
can I?
discovered no. They discovered the baryons that gave the effusion of mass, not the existence of gravity.
like I said,
Okay,
I
that is
don't believe that claim.
huge
I don't
differences.
believe the claim.
Can I
Uh,
break in? Can I break in with
But
a?
wait,
Okay.
no, I'm
Look,
not done.
I just want to respond to what I'm
Let
saying.
me finish cooking. Okay, so here's my thing, Drazi. If science is based on theories, a lot of the
Mhm.
science that we do, would you say then that science is dogmatic?
Sometimes it is. Yeah, I think that sometimes science becomes extremely dogmatic
Okay,
by way of not
so we're
letting other
talking about
ideas come in. Yeah.
brother, we are talking about the basic building blocks of what we build logic on, even through like the ideas of like mathematics itself. Everything in your
I said
ideology.
sometimes.
No, we can go into mathematics if you want to. We can go into like this abstract, like how do you prove that one equals one shit, which at some point you have to go ahead and throw up to, oh, we just kind of
Yeah,
accept that it
we
exists.
assume the
That's what
existence of
there
the
is.
one. Yeah.
Yes, there is no mathematics. It is literally then at the point that you're putting it at, the minutia that you're driving this through, everything becomes dogmatic and perceptive, which is postmodernist. But you're also trying to go ahead and reject postmodernism in your arguments. This is my frustration with you.
Okay, so hang on. So what I'm talking about when I say gravity, we are observing something happening, and I accept that we are labeling this phenomena that we are observing
Mhm.
as gravity. I say
Yeah.
sure. Now, certainly at a certain point, I am taking a bunch of things for granted. If you go down my presuppositional axioms, sure, I take a lot of things for
When you
granted.
take things for granted, would you say that you are practicing a dogma because you're taking them for granted?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I'm not proclaiming that anybody is without the dogma. That's my whole point, is that atheists are just as dogmatic as their opposition being the religious. I'm not saying anybody's without dogma here, but I
Mhm.
guess my prescription would be that everybody should maybe chill the fuck
Well,
out and at least when they're pressed say, ultimately I don't really know.
but
That's
like
kind of like my
a
drive to have this argument.
a big part of the all right, so first off, you titled the stream "Are Atheists Bad?" That's what I thought this was.
Are
That's
atheists
what I'm
just as
thinking.
bad as religious people? It's a little bit clickbaity, but in my
Yeah,
description, I
I
give a better
understand
fleshed
that,
out
but like
version of it.
so here's the thing: do you think being dogmatic is bad?
I think that being blindly dogmatic and to where the point to where like you can't even acknowledge that you are is bad. I think that being dogmatic in the context in which I'm talking about it tends to lead to outcomes that I don't like.
Okay, so but you think everybody's dogmatic, right?
Yeah, and it would just be a lot
Okay,
better if
so
we were
if
willing
if
to acknowledge that.
so your basic, claim here is that you have to acknowledge that no matter what you do, everything you believe is dogmatic, right?
Sure,
Effectively.
Sure, but there's different levels of dogmatism. Like when we
Mhm.
get it down to our axioms, things that everybody just sort of has to accept in order to like act like a human being, to function in
Mhm.
society, all that, to talk to people. There's certain levels of like axioms that we can sort of just get past and say like, yeah, obviously we all know that we're assuming these, but we're all going to firmly attest that they're true because we have no way. Everything seems like it's true. Everything that we do sort of supports this idea, and until then, we're all just kind of gonna kind of go with the flow, even though ultimately it's unjustified. When we talk about true, we always mean true in support of these axiomatic ideas being correct because they seem to be. Um,
What Brittany Simon level of dogmatism would you say you're at? What point?
with what?
I don't know. It's like a 1 to 5 scale. This was a
Yeah, I know.
joke.
In reference to like religion, I would say like that's the thing when it comes to religion. I am not dogmatic because I just say like, there's no fucking way to know. Are
No,
you
you are
kidding me?
dogmatic. No, you're literally dogmatic about anything you believe. You've already admitted this. So you are dogmatic about your beliefs.
Insofar as we move past the level of dogmatism that like talking requires, so after we
Yeah.
move out of like presuppositional ideology and we get into like the things that we all agree upon,
Mhm.
I would say that when it comes to religion,
So
I am not dogmatic because I'll be the first to say like, I know that I can't know. To
so would you
pretend to know
would you
is crazy.
would you say that John merely showing up today proves that that he is not as bad as like other atheists who are as dogmatic? I think just merely him coming here and being like, yeah, you know what, I'll have the conversation, we'll see how it goes and shit. Like John himself is literally the presupposing antithesis to what you're saying just by
No,
merely being here and having this conversation
he's
at all.
agnostic too.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter, right? It's still dogmatic. He's making anti-theist arguments, right? Like that's the point. Is he is presenting himself as the anti-theist here, right? And that is the arguments he's presenting. He may be coming through an anti-theist agnostic lens, whereas you're coming from whatever agnostic lens you're coming from, right? But you're ultimately arguing the theist agnostic. He's arguing the anti-theist agnostic. So we take out the
Mm,
agnostic because that's fucking worthless to
I'm
me.
not.
Okay.
I'm arguing that both sides are doing the same thing.
I
That's
feel
my
like
whole
it's just
Razi,
position.
you said that
you're just saying
you literally
no,
said earlier that theism has the answer versus
No.
agnostics. You said that earlier, like they don't have the answer. They don't have the full answer. And you said it in a
No,
way that
I
implied that you think that is somehow superior
I'm
to
saying
somebody who's saying I don't know.
no. I'm saying that atheists proclaim that there is
Okay, you
nothing
mean
and that
Gnostic
the only
atheism. Can we just
yeah,
not call them
I'm using atheism the same way that I defined it as within the discussion.
why?
Because if I meant
Why no, I'm
agnostic,
sorry. I'm sorry. Why are we using it when atheism covers both Gnostic and agnostic atheism? Why are we using it in this way?
well, I don't understand why you would use atheist when you actually mean agnostic.
Because they're not incompatible. They're not mutually exclusive. I can be agnostic and I can be an atheist. Atheism just means lack of belief, literally.
Sure.
And
Uh,
Gnostic is putting forth a very specific position.
so
So
I said
what that
atheist
when you
because it
I'm sorry it like just it is frustrating because when you then later go on to talk about the behaviors of certain atheists, you are like you're conflating the two between agnostics and gnostics. Can we just call them gnostics for the
uh
purposes of the conversation? Because
like if you need me to do that in order to talk to you, even though this the way that I use the word is going to work in almost every other conversation, I suppose so.
yeah, but
But
like,
the reason I say that is because
scientific
there are some things that break apart when you talk about it and you are just a blanket statement talking about atheists as a whole. That's my problem. we can, I mean, if you want, we can have a discussion, but then again, like the clickbaity title is then going out the window when you're only talking about a very specific, I don't know, it becomes even more clickbaity, I guess.
Well,
But
I guess,
it
but I
And I,
did
I
make sure that I
I'm
defined
not
my
asking for
term.
something unreasonable, I don't think.
and
I,
like,
I said yeah already.
Okay.
all right, and I think like one of the things. So you think bad dogmatism, bad; good dogmatism, good. Your good dogmatism. Do you think that Dan in this, because again he is your anti-interlocutor,
You
right?
talking about John?
Is John? Sorry, John. All right, I don't know. I just
God damn it.
it's a replaceable male name in that like the fucking.
That's all
West.
right. It's all the
Yeah,
same, really.
I know it's fine. You can do your thing. But here's the thing, right? So, but again, merely John being here again is saying this is good dogmatism from a anti-theistic perspective, which is the antithesis of your argument.
I simply wanted to make the point that they are both being dogmatic in the same way. They are both asserting their positions that are ultimately unjustified, and I don't like it because atheists act like sorry, what how do you want me to say it? Gnostic atheists?
Yeah, just Gnostics, fine. It's fine.
Gnostics want to proclaim that they are just correct, that the religious people are wrong and they are correct, when ultimately they are operating their certainty under the same kind of dogmatic belief that the religious person is operating under. Ultimately, there is something that is past our presuppositional accepting of everything that like everybody agrees on, atheists and Gnostics and theists alike, all the things that we already agree on. Moving past that, they are proclaiming to have a non-dogmatic view that there is no God and that they are superior in their line of thinking to religious people. And I think that because of that, this is going to make for a really bad conversation that is not just unpersuasive, but it's also self-deluding. They're like deluding themselves into believing that they have this like superior way of approaching this issue. And it's not. They are ultimately just as unjustified as the religious are in coming to the conclusion.
Okay.
Do you think you have a superior way of coming to this issue?
I'm not drawing it. That my whole thing is that I'm not going to draw the conclusion. I'm saying that like I know that I can't know.
But like, so if they're claiming theirs is the superior way, you are inferring that it is not the superior way in the cadence, tone, and what you're saying about it, right?
Well, okay, what I'm saying, the superior thing is to acknowledge that there is room for uncertainty, but like putting these two against each other to say that well, I'm right and you're wrong because you're basing your ideas off of things that aren't justified, but my disbelief is totally justified. I'm saying that yeah, that is less superior because you're deluding yourself into thinking that it's not dogmatic when it is. And if you understand that it is, then you'll have a better ability to understand your own feelings about the subject, and you'll have a better ability to empathize with the other person who's just arriving at a different conclusion using the same kind of unjustified like thought process that you are. So yeah, I would say that it is less justified to assume yourself not dogmatic if you're coming to the concrete conclusion that there's no God, no creator, no higher powers or anything like that.
Okay, and this is partly why. Look, this is partly why I came in hot. Okay, because like the thing is, in earlier you said you wanted like examples of like a conclusion to atheism without invoking dogmatic reasoning. There's like 100 different ways that I can tell you how that can be achieved. Like on an agnostic path that will lead me to disbelief, but not to say there is no God. Now, I can agree with your like thesis that Gnostic atheism, like there's quite a bit of dogma there, right? But this is what again why it was very confusing because I don't think that like even okay, Matt Diddlehunty, I'll give that one to you because I'm pretty sure he has stated that like that he is a Gnostic atheist, right?
Yeah, I
But
want to
not a
like him. He's just a
I mean, I
prick.
want to like him. I mean, I watched him a lot when I was deconverting. Like, that's fine. And ultimately, I do disagree. He think he's a bit of a dick. But like, the thing is that I think he has stated more or less that he is a Gnostic atheist. I do think that there is some dogma there as far as like taking that one more step and saying there is no God. The problem is I don't think that the majority of like atheists, even the smug, shitty, like argumentative, like deprecating atheists out there, like I don't think that most of them are Gnostic. Now, their claim that religions are inferior, like I guess you could call that dogmatic too, but
Yeah.
like I don't think that I think it's just too broad of an umbrella. That's my problem with the whole thing.
Yeah, I understood part of the way through that I should clearly define what I'm talking about. That's why I defined atheist the way that I did. It came
Okay,
up to where John
I
was
might have
giving me
missed
an
the part, by the
example.
way, when you did actually make that distinction. But go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
sorry.
like if I have a beef with like the majority of Christianity and somebody's like, if somebody was like, well, hang on a minute, you're talking about like fuck, like I don't know, like I know some umbrella grouping term that covers like most of them, but it wouldn't cover like Lutherans, right? Like can you say non-Lutheran Christians? I'm like, what the I guess. Like in order to talk to you, but for most of the time, after I say what I mean, it's gonna be applicable. So like that's why I just use atheist for the most part, because most of the people that are like, thank you very much, Froggy Style, for gifting a membership. Sorry. Most of the time when I see people who are debating in favor of it, which is like I wrote a Substack about this too. I hate the way that self-proclaimed atheist debaters debate against religious people. It's so unnecessarily aggressive and discompassionate, and it's not, the purpose isn't to convert them. It's just to jack themselves off in front of the people that are going to cheer for them. That's all it is. And so part of the reason why I'm interested in having this debate is to sort of demonstrate the people that are doing that, which are going to be the ones that are getting the most views, getting the most attention, are they're falling prey to the same kind of thing that they're criticizing the religious people for falling into. And I fucking hate it.
I mean, I think I personally see it a different way, in that like there is a reason why there is a particular reason why this brand of atheism, if I may, like has become so jaded and bitter, and has become like dug its heels in, and goes on like like literally anti-theism arcs, right? And it's
Sure.
partially because like of the tendency of these religions to claim the moral higher ground, to engage in these circular reasonings over and over again, and like not actually, and a lot of it is emotion, a lot of it is like shell responses, a lot of it is like circular reasoning. So I can see how doing it over and over again, of course Matt Dillahunty would become a jaded prick. He's debating like Christians over and over and over again, who are bringing out the same tired points over and over again, and these are the people who are ultimately shaping our lives and are shaping our laws and shit. So I can understand the bitterness. I don't know if the way to tackle that is to necessarily point out the dogma, because like what's your ultimate goal there?
Well, in order to get somebody to change their behavior, you have to get them to understand the behavior to begin with.
Sure.
So if I can, so like for instance, if Matt Dillahunty, for example, understood that what he's doing is ultimately unjustified, then when he's arguing against religious people, if he's openly accepted the idea that his conclusions are ultimately unjustified, he can no longer use the fact that the religious person that he's talking to has an ultimately unjustifiable position in their belief in God as just sort of like the biggest bat that he has to swing at them. And so it would force him to come up with better arguments.
Hold on.
If
Maybe put aside. I want to put aside Matt Dillon, and I swear, Rezzy, I won't take up too much
it was
more
just
of your time. But
it was just an example.
Whatever you want. I'm having
The-
fun now.
okay,
Watch
Matt.
It'll make sense.
Matt Dillahunty. Okay, look, Matt Dillahunty. Maybe we could put him to a side for just a second,
Sure.
because I know that he's that I know that he's a Gnostic atheist, right? Apart from that one extra step, as we may, right? Like, do you still see agnostic atheists with the same level as dogma as
No.
Gnostic ones? Okay.
So here's the thing. So I consider myself an agnostic, and I'm like 60-40.
60-40.
Like leaning towards that there is nothing, there is no higher intelligence, there's no creator or anything like that. But it might even be, it could potentially be higher in there being faith in the idea if it wasn't so much for my understanding of how strongly like human psychology desires to like attach themselves to these ideologies and things like that. Because I think
Sure.
that there is really compelling things that suggest that like maybe this wasn't all by accident. Like there's some pretty there's pretty interesting idea, like there's pretty interesting observations that you could make that makes the universe happening by accident like a pretty far stretched idea
Sure.
to me. So I lean more towards there's no creator, there's no higher power, or anything like that. But there's still a significant part of me that's like, I understand some arguments, and I wish that religious people also made some of these arguments because. I'll be honest, I think that the way that religious people argue for their cause really fucking sucks too. I think I can argue on behalf of most people's religions better than they can. But I guess that's sort of the nature of being a person of faith. You don't really have to have super well crafted arguments because you just believe.
Yeah, I think I think maybe like I don't I don't know. I still don't think I see whether like the tie between pointing out the dogma and because for the most part I would say that people who are this jaded and bitter, they have kind of lost that empathy
Yeah.
towards the people who are theists, and in turn they are not like some of them don't understand the role the like or the beneficial role maybe that religion does play in these people's lives, and there are some people who are just like committed to finding the truth no matter what, right? No matter like how clinical or whatever else. But there are, and I
Sure.
would
I would say
personally
I'd fall
argue,
into that camp.
sure, or like you don't care if there are benefits of
Yeah, that's
religion.
like that's like Jordan. Like you could consider Jordan Peterson that because like ultimately he's an atheist, but he calls himself a Christian because like from an outside perspective, like he does all the things Christians do, even though he doesn't really believe it's true. He acts as though it's true. So like he's like this really weird thing that's sort of cropping up now, at least publicly, where
Wait. Say that again. What is he again?
Jordan
I
Peterson doesn't
Yeah.
believe that the Bible is true, but he believes in the usefulness of the stories in the Bible and that the
Okay.
rules that it lays out are the best way to live a good and healthy life. And he also thinks that sort of the way that the story has moved throughout history and impacted humanity is important and needs to be preserved in that right as well. Despite the fact that he doesn't think that there is any like matter of fact truth about the nature of the Bible and like its association with like a higher power, but he's just going to live his life as though it was. So he's like technically like
Is
doesn't
he like
believe.
doing like a is he like doing like a Pascal's wager sort of deal like
I
where
swear to
it's
God, I think it's something he pulled out of his ass when he was debating Sam Harris because Sam Harris had him up against the wall, and it was like the biggest like Jimmy Neutron brain blast moment of his entire life, and he's just been running with it ever since. Because honestly, it was fucking brilliant. It got him out of the whole mess he was in, and he wasn't making that argument when it would have been pretty useful to him prior to that. So it was
and
just like a way to save his ass.
he wasn't doing like a I think who was it like William Lane Craig who like says like that morals like he's not pulling that right where like morals come from religion. He's not.
I think he's saying that like the morals that we do hold valuable are found within the Bible, and like that's I think he might think that like the stories in the Bible might be where we originally derived them from. That might be something. I think that there's no conflict with him doing that, at least with what he's doing now with his like religion, like what he's
Sure.
espousing a religion is to
Sure.
him.
Okay.
So at least he could do that.
Sure. I mean, that's fine. I guess that like I don't know. I think that maybe like I really do think that if we're trying to get through to Gnostics, I guess like part of the problem is that they're jaded and bitter, right? You're not going to necessarily get rid of that because to a certain degree, like some of that is not unjustified, right? Like it's funny that John brought up Saudi earlier when like I grew up in Saudi and like literally had my life ruled by religious like police. And yeah, it gave me a very bitter view of certain religious practices, right? Both
Sure.
Christian and Islamic. So, I think that it's really hard to get past that, and this was before I even ever like deconverted or anything. So I think it's really hard to get past that. I do agree that like the dogma is always going to be there no matter what, right? Like no
Yes.
matter what, there are always going to be people who don't uh, take the time to examine their beliefs, who kind of are like the Reddit atheists who like they deconverted purely because of that. But I guess that I don't
Oh my
think
God,
that
that's all I'm
that's
gonna call them from now on. Thank you.
Reddit atheists.
That's such a searing burn.
But here's
Okay,
the thing:
Reddit
is like
atheist.
I mean, I think the problem though is that and okay, if you're talking about those people who like entirely just derive their arguments like or their stance from this kind of thing, sure, those people are like I guess you could say it's a dogmatism. It's like it's a belief, right? At that point, it's like your atheism is kind of a belief because you've not followed anything through to its logical conclusion. Like you haven't
Yeah.
like deconstructed the actual like concept, and you haven't like whatever. But like I also don't think that everybody needs to break down their relationship with theism to that degree
I think that if
because we
you
don't we don't
don't,
ask we don't ask we don't ask everybody to do this. We don't call everybody like dogmatic who hasn't broken it down to this level.
so the problem is that yeah, there this is a particularly big problem when somebody is coming from faith to being out of faith. So like if I'm gay and I decide to stop being Christian because of how people that are like more traditionally Christian, because Christianity's lightened up on that shit like a lot because they have to. The PR was just too much for them. Uh,
Mm.
but if that's the reason why, and then all of a sudden now God doesn't exist, you didn't really have any honest examination of that idea. You just said, I'm just going to throw all of this away because I don't like how people are making me feel. This isn't an honest telling of your beliefs anymore. You're just saying that you're just discarding something that you believed for a really, really long time based on how people treated you that is wholly separate from how they treated you. You're saying some people that believed this thing that I believe are treating me badly, so now I no longer believe something that I took as a fact of the matter prior. And I think that that's stupid too.
I
Like
mean,
you
I'm
do
not
have to
dismissing.
deconstruct
I'm
that.
not.
Otherwise, like I don't even know. Are you just living cognitive dissonance? Are you actually still a Christian that's just like seriously hurt by the homophobia in your like local community? Like I think that these are
I
things that are
think
really worth examining.
the problem though is that like how many of these people do we actually see where they have truly been influenced by one thing? Like okay, look, right? Like if you ask any person who has deconverted from theism to atheism, they usually can provide like a couple of key uh, things that happened in their life or like revelations that they had that essentially like was the trigger. But for the most part, their underpinnings had probably already been undermined in some way or the other, assuming that they were like genuine believers prior to that and not just like simply like following what they had been taught, right? It's just that you don't see the degradation of those other underpinnings
Sure.
until the last straw drops, right?
Right. So I'm giving that example of people that I find this to be a particularly egregious denouncement of faith. I'm not saying that this is how typically it's going to go. I think most of the time it's going to be like something ends up planting a seed and then, just sort of like I don't think that you can logic somebody out of their faith. Like it has to be something that is realized. I think that you can provide people with enough information to where they might end up having a realization on their own that the things that they thought were not true. And I think that's the only way that it really happens. There might be some really rare edge cases where somebody was just like super convinced that like logically like Islam is correct, and then somebody pointed out like a logical fallacy that allowed them to like deconstruct the whole idea. But I think it's generally going to be the kind of thing that I think for the most part, most people aren't really aren't as religious as they think they are. They're just sort of along for the ride, and then it's like really easy for them to let go of some of these things.
Sure,
But
I
when you
guess
come
I
to
guess
the
what I mean
when
is
but when people come to the point when they say God doesn't exist, like this is clearly wrong, I'm saying like that's a really dogmatic jump. You're taking a leap of faith to say that there's no God or no creator at all.
sure. I guess what I mean is that like even the person who is loudly proclaiming like I left religion because like my friend came out as gay and everybody started hating on them. Like like I think that the part of the problem is that like if you're taking that you're to a certain degree you are taking them at face value.
I mean, sure, if they give me more information, I'll feel differently. I'm always going to
Yeah.
operate within the information that I have about any given thing. But if they add more
Right.
context, then I'll feel differently about it, of course. I'm
Sure.
not like unreasonable, like, oh, but you said no. I'm willing to listen to people.
Yeah, I guess my question is that because then it just becomes a question of like, well, like how many people are actually like, of course we're gonna get the people who are like, yeah, believing in a sky dad is kind of weird, right? Like but like you could say that and still have a very coherent explanation at the end of the day. Like here's the breakdown of why I deconverted, right? It's just that like the thing that I say is going to be the thing that you know me as. You might label me as a Reddit atheist when at some point in time like I could have been just like shooting the shit and like dunking on Christoids for fun and profit, like that's so I guess that's my I guess that's my
Sure.
problem with it.
At a certain point, if I'm close enough to the person to where like my assumption that what they said is all that there is becomes a problem, we're probably going to end up delving into it, and I'll probably get a better understanding, and I can kind of go through the things that I think might have been like an irrational jump at that point, and then I'll talk about those things. But part of the reason why I bring up those extreme examples, which may not really be all that is there, is because I think it's a good example of how people that deconvert from religion, even if they do have it's just like the most extreme example of showing how there's like this like whatever the reverse of like a leap of faith would be. And even if it's not just that, then there's like micro ones that are happening where they're not going to be really as logically sound as like the end result proclaims itself to be. And this is the thing that I don't like, which like I wanted to go back to what you said about like Dillahunty's too jaded and all that. So like I know that I probably can't reach people like that, but the people that watch these conversations, I want them to understand that there is a sort of dogmatism that's being led to these kinds of ideas. And so at least when they're making those kinds of arguments, maybe there will be less people cheering when they're jacking themselves off, saying how much more right they are than the religious person. Because
Sure.
I want better arguments. I want better discourse when it comes to like atheist and religious debates. Because for one, it's always the same fucking debate, and
Right.
it's maddening. And also because I like studying religion. I've studied religion. Like physics and religion are two things I've studied like since like I could go to like the library like as a teen, and the state in which I see the discourse on these things have basically moved nowhere in my entire lifetime. And so I think that part of the way that we can get some forward momentum on these discussions is not just letting the Gnostic atheists slide on this idea that they have all the science backing them, when really they're pretty religious in their position that there is no God.
I I I would say that good luck to you, right? Holy fuck.
Does this all make more
But
sense than what you
no,
thought?
this makes more sense. But I
Okay.
will I am gonna say that like I think I do stick to I will stick to my assertion that you are going to want to make the distinction because of the fact that like most people do end up in the I don't know camp, right? Like the I know parts, at least to
Yeah.
me, right, kind
So
of seem born out of a desire to be blustered, to be like certain on it, to be dismissive on some level for sure, right? But like the underlying thing, like if you're going to point out dogma, right? Like you're going to have to you may have a hard time finding the dogma in the agnostic side. That's what my point is, I guess.
That's what I'm
And
saying. The three camps you can be in, I would say agnostics are the least dogmatic because saying like I don't fucking know. It's
right.
dogmatic to proclaim knowledge, or proclaim a justification for what you do know. But to say that I don't know is ultimately saying like there is no real position to strongly hold here.
Sure.
If there's a dichotomy to be had, it's a rejection of the dichotomy, basically.
Sure. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but so I have one
Yeah.
question for you.
Yeah,
Would
go
you
ahead.
put people? So I've heard this from I think I want to know if you'd consider these people Gnostic or agnostic atheists when they go like, well, I think that like obviously I know that I can't know, but I think that like the 99% certainty that I'm right that there is no God. I'd say that they are actually saying there's a 100% chance that I'm right, and that you're retarded for thinking that there's a God.
I think okay.
That's what I think
So,
that they're
so
really
okay, okay,
doing.
okay,
They're
okay. So
only
you're
given the
saying
1%
no,
because they have
so
to.
okay, I see what you're saying. I think I see it more of a nod to literally like the mountain of evidence that like that theists would have to bring to the table in order for that to be like for them to be disproven. I'm not saying that they're not like you know they're giving. I think the 1% like you know it's hyperbolic, right? Maybe they are. Maybe they do mean 100%, but presumably these people like okay if you ask them if there were proof that could be given to them that they would then change their mind and become a theist. I think that they would say yes, there is proof that you could give me. That's the difference, right?
Do you think that that proof is something that could be so I guess the proof that they would demand would require that if there is the God that they're arguing against would sort of have to like
Make an
meet their
appearance yeah.
yeah, like Jesus Christ himself would have to resurrect from the dead, put his hand with a big fat hole in the center of it on their shoulder and be like, "My son, shut the fuck up." Like there's like nothing else that they would be able to accept.
But to be fair, like that we're getting to the point where like the god of the gaps like it the gap is really small now, right? Like you can't just like say okay lightning like strike down on this piece of land. Like you can't
So
just do that anymore. You
sure,
have to
the
get very specific. You have to get very like you because of where we are in this point of time, we can't just say we're gonna take a sign and interpret that as the existence of God. So
right.
yeah, I do think the God has to like go down a very low, like a limbo bar, right?
So the kinds of yeah, I agree, and I think that part of the problem with when people are trying to proclaim so like I prefer to just like look at uh the positive or negative of the idea of a creator is much more interesting than any of these other like more like diluted or like sectored off ideas. But like if somebody wants to like argue for a creator, the issue that I have with these people that say like 1% is that we have things, if you look at a macro scale, there are things that have really no reason to work the way that they do. Like the fact that, so like we have biological systems that are pretty easily fucked with. This makes sense. Like you get a parasite or you get a bacteria or you get a virus in your body, it starts to fuck up, break down, and you die. That makes perfect sense by random chance, right? There's no reason why that wouldn't be the case, that like some sand in the gears could ruin it all. But the fact that there's so many like medical solutions is kind of fucking weird. That doesn't have to exist at all. There could just be problems and no solutions. That to me is very interesting to look at with an amalgamation of like other things. This to me would add a point to there might be some kind of intelligence behind like all of creation here. Like things breaking
I
down,
think
chaos always makes sense, but like order doesn't necessarily have to have any good like there's no like really good reason to suppose order where there which just makes no sense for randomness to create it.
okay, but
And when
and I take your no, like I take your point, right? Like and I'm not nearly knowledgeable enough to know this shit, but there is like some part, like there's like quantum physics shit, and like there's
yeah,
there's some parts of science that like that we can't explain, that certain scientists have acknowledged that, hey, this is kind of like really weird. This is
yeah, I'm big into
probably
quantum
like the thing.
physics. There is shit that's
Yeah, like,
crazy.
but here's the thing though, like none of that, like that, acknowledging that is a wholly different can of worms than saying, hey, Yahweh, the king of the Israelite, the
Yeah,
god
yeah,
of the
yeah, yeah. That's why
Israelites.
I
So
said
I think that's
talking about the notion of a creator is much more interesting to me
okay.
because
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
things
yeah.
that we can look at and say like, how many times do I have to roll the die and it lands on 6 in a row before we say like, this is basically impossible. You're cheating. Like this isn't happening by random chance. These are the kinds of things that I find really interesting when you present them to somebody and they hand wave it all. I'm saying like, you're not giving more than 1% when I can stack up all these things. Like that seems like it's really
I
like
mean,
bad faith to me. Like to say
I
that
mean
like,
that
okay,
is,
I'll
I
get,
would
if
say
they
that
say
it's, I would
10%, I'd be happy.
I think, look, I think that it is bad faith in a way that they're applying their like skepticism towards like a specific religious god to just the idea that there is something out there that cannot be explained. Like I think in that sense it is bad faith, right? But then
Yeah,
I think that that's then just down to your like your opponent of choice. Like that that's just my kind of personal opinion, right? Like it's just that you are then looking at a person who, you know, isn't willing to sort of acknowledge, and assuming that they understand all of this, right? They
sure.
understand like what you're talking about. You
Of
know,
course, you can't
sure,
argue
in
with
that
somebody
case,
and just say stuff they don't understand. Might as well be
yeah,
speaking
yeah,
another language. It's not fair.
yeah. But like, and again, like this is kind of where I would concede to like I don't know, so I'm not willing to say one way or the other, right?
Sure.
But I'm also not willing to I'm not comfortable putting a number on it, right? Because to a certain degree, I am way more agnostic than Gnostic.
Sure,
So
and I
I guess,
respect that. That's nobody saying like I know that I can't know will ever get
right,
any complaints out of me. In
yeah,
terms of like this kind of framing of the religion question, because that's the only respectful thing. Like I don't know if you were here, but I had an old coworker, Bill, and he told me that somebody at his Bible study said, "Raise your hand if you know you're going to heaven." And Bill didn't raise his hand. Bill, why didn't you raise your hand? He goes, "Well, I hope I'm going to heaven, but I don't know. I don't know if any of this is true. Like, I believe it is. I have faith that it is, but like, I don't know that." And I was like, "I love
right,
you, Bill. You're my favorite Christian I've ever met. God bless you."
sure.
All right.
That warmed me.
He's an agnostic theist. All right.
Yeah,
No,
and
I
So
mean, yeah, yeah.
that I just want the same kind of attitude for from people that are like very strongly believe that there is no God.
Sure. I guess it's just a very hard it I would say that it's a very hard minority, not minority. You're looking at a box of very tough cookies when you should probably not focus on the tough cookies so much and more on like the nice gooey chewy cookies, right? Like I think you should focus on the agnostics because it is easier to, I would say, foster empathy and like a better discussion, like a better understanding and discussion of like theism than it is to kind of make the hardliners turn around, if that makes sense.
all right. That all said, I have to get going.
Yeah, I gotta head out too. But this is fun.
Yeah, good talk.
Yeah, I'm gonna head off as well.
You guys take care. Final words. Bill is a cuck. Believe in something or don't. Get the fuck used to it. People are gonna be that way, and they still should live. I don't think you're scripting bad, or like you don't care about bad. You just are doing the same bad thing that everybody else is doing here, Drazi. But we
Yeah.
can talk about that another time.
Yeah, and also
Yeah, thank you very much, Chelsea.
Thank you,
one
John.
Yes.
Did you call him Bill this
one
time?
more thing.
Yeah. No, I called your friend
Jesus
Bill,
Christ.
your favorite Christian Bill. I told him that he's a cuck. All right. Anyways, I gotta go.
All right.
Wow, what an exit.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Thank you, Chelsea.
you're welcome. Did you
Head off
have
as well.
fun in the post debate part?
Yeah, it was an interesting debate.
Yeah, welcome to my little corner of the internet here.
I love it, man. Thank you very much. Cheers.
You're
Bye bye.
welcome. Have a good one. Bye. Destiny looks you holding hands with Mel. Will not know more. Destiny has triple body count. How you everyone since Jesus Christ. So Kanak, it seemed like to me that you were like trying to get down on this. Unfortunately, well, so two things. One, if you want to talk to me about it, just DM me, and I love talking about religion. Like religion and physics are two things that I'm pretty much always down to talk about. No, ice beans. I like you. I know you. Also, like arguing with me or debating with me is one thing that I never get upset about. You can be aggressive and all that. If it's too much, I'm like, whoa, fucking chill. Like if you come in too hot, I'm pretty okay with telling people like, I think you're being like way too aggressive. Holy shit. Like I can't match your energy right now. Let's tone it down. But like, no, I think you're fine. And I never have any hard feelings over like debate. Like the only way that somebody's gonna hurt my feelings in a debate is if they're trying to. Um, and I'll probably just have my feelings hurt because they're trying to, not because of the content of what they say. You're good. But Kanak, shoot me a DM and I'll set up time to talk about this if you want to. Um, I really love the debate that you just had. Like for you at least, the other person, I think they worked really hard to embarrass themselves. But I'll make sure that you have the content creator role so that way you can hop in and don't have to get pulled into. Also, Ice Beans, yeah, even if you're not a stream, I don't know if I've only seen you on other people's streams, so I don't know, but I'll still give you role. I'll give you perms as though you did stream, in case you don't. That's fair. Well, sure, you stream like that, but you like to come into other people's streams when it's like politics and debates and shit too. I seen you first in Tuna's chat. Facts. Destiny's a ladies' man, male model. He's better than Jesus Christ. Stop it. I do love calling in to yell at Wick and stuff. Yeah. Well, you have perms in my Discord. If there's anything that you want to speak up on, like yeah, like I said, I'm familiar with you. I've known you. We've spoken once or twice. You're cool, and at least just the fact that you even said I don't mean Mr. Girls Women's Panel. Were you? Wait, were you on there when No, I seen you in Tuna's like regular stream chat. I thought maybe I'm thinking of somebody else, but you're welcome, Kanak. Were you still on that stream when my wife joined? I think you were. I think you talked to my wife. Yeah, one of the few. I remember your wife. Okay, yeah. To be fair, it's hard to forget her. You don't meet a legitimately albino woman very often. If I ever lose her in a store, it's very easy to get people to help me find her because the descriptors are super helpful. Yeah. So, Knack, if I had more time, I would have pulled you in to talk. But I know when my wife got home, she asked me. She wrote on a piece of paper, "dinner?" ? And I was like, after, I didn't think I was going to go this long. It went further than I thought, which is a good thing for me. But tomorrow, gonna go back to some of the normal stuff. I'm also probably going to give like another mini like physics lecture. Maybe not. It just depends on how frustrated I am with the Mr. Girl Black Hole stuff in the moment. It might invoke some more physics stuff like the other night did, but gonna do the return to the analysis, Mr. Girl and Destiny bridge burning. I want to find the not so erudite Mr. Girl and Destiny streams. One of my favorite streams of all time too. So that'll be fun. And I feel like there's something else. Oh, on Saturday I'm going on the Alex Kirsch podcast. So I look forward to that. And I have something else this week. I just don't remember. But if you're in the Discord and you want to know and you don't have the role, Oh yeah. Just realized too, I got rated and I didn't even put it in there. If you're in the Discord and you don't have the role, you can always get pinged when there's a stream. Yeah, that's it. I'm gonna wrap it up.